half an hour or something was the limit. I've started recording and broadcasting again. Hopefully both are still available. Yeah, the next question was, how many examples should we use? In the case of counterinsurgency, can we narrow to Afghanistan and Iraq? There's no guide for how many examples you should use. You should use appropriate examples. That's something you just have to learn to gauge by doing it. What makes it, what strengthens the argument. In the case of counterinsurgency, yeah, I think you could focus on Iraq or Afghanistan or somewhere else if you wanted to, depending on what exactly the question was. So if the question was something that would allow it, or if you change the question to say, as we see in the case of Iraq, this or that happens or doesn't happen. This is a little bit too this is a bit abstract, so I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about. Tulio, could you, if you maybe provide a more precise example? What was the counterinsurgency question? So let's see. No other questions. So just about, does anybody else have any questions while Tulio is possibly responding, unless he feels that's good? Alrighty. Okay, well, if nobody has any further questions, I also don't even necessarily know if anybody's still there. It says I'm live with 12 viewers, so hopefully. Yeah, if nobody else has any questions, then thanks for joining. And yeah, if you have any specific questions about your essays in particular, by the way, I haven't gone back into Google Drive, so don't bother commenting on my comments. It wasn't a discussion. So I'm not going to go back in and talk about individual things, but I have spoken with a couple of people on the phone about their essays. Yeah. Oh, good. Here's another one. Is narrowing and grounding a broad topic for an essay a good idea? Deep and long or broad and short? I always think that going a bit deeper, because you can make, if you make an argument about a broad thing about many different things, you run the very strong risk of covering everything kind of superficially and not convincing anyone of anything. So because you won't have time to cover anything in depth. So you might end up, you probably will end up, and a lot of people did this with the migration question. There were so many different types of migration and so many different situations. Yes, I see. Okay, don't relax, I'm still here. I think there's a bit of a lag and the questions are all coming out now. With the migration question, there was this very broad, very many different topics. And I wrote things like, because people would say things like, oh, it can put a strain on local economies. And I also wrote, yes, but it sometimes helps local economies. It increases competition for jobs or raises unemployment. Well, the evidence about that is actually pretty ambiguous. It's not clear that that's true in the case of immigrants. So, and also, what are we talking about? What's a lot of immigrants? 10,000, 50,000? Do you know what I mean? So I think it would be much better to focus on one type and include a fair assessment of the counter arguments as well, and stave off that criticism. Anyone that might criticize you and say, oh, but wait, there's no evidence of that. You'd say, well, I know there's no evidence. Here, look at this. This says there's no evidence of it, but it's stupid. Here, this evidence says this. And what's the lesson out of this? So I always think if you can reasonably narrow it and argue something very clearly and well, you're going to do better than a broad topic where the reader goes, what is this even about and what's the point? So if someone might read it and go, I have no idea where this is going, I think that's not good. I hope I'm not all leading you down the wrong path, but that's I don't read any arguments in journal articles or things like that are so broad that they're completely off topic. Okay. Do we have to precisely define the term security? You don't need to precisely define it, maybe, but you do need to give people an idea of what you're talking about. So I think it's critical, for example, to talk about whether you're talking about relative security or absolute 100% security, or what you mean by security if you're going to secure infrastructures, for example, that you mean that the impact on people's lives, that, for example, if the power grid failed, that thousands of people wouldn't die. That's a definition of security. So saying, not that nobody will die, but that maybe only a couple of people, like if a storm hits, somebody dies. If anything happens, somebody dies, but not mass chaos and looting and things like that. So we can secure the grid, and we can make sure that we respond quickly. We can make sure that hospitals have generators, that police departments will continue functioning, that we have other ways of communicating between government offices so that everything doesn't collapse. I hope that makes sense. So you can provide some kind of definition. It doesn't have to be super precise dictionary definition, but it needs to be clear what you mean. Is this relative? What is security? Or for you, it may not be death or not. It might be something more like economic security or something like that. And then you need to talk about where the limit is between poverty, where the limit is between freedom to do something and freedom from. But I don't think you need to get complicated. I think it can actually be fairly simple. How far can we go in interpreting a question without getting off topic? That's completely up to you. So I'm sorry, there's no real way to. It should be, it should be on topic. If you're interpreting a question, if it's basically the same question, I don't know if I had too many people. And there were a couple of essays. I can't remember exactly. There was one essay that I do remember that took the immigration question and turned it into a question about European identity. That person wrote such a good essay, though, that I was willing to accept it, and it was related to migration. So it was how migration impacts European identity, but it was more about how Europeans need to be thinking about identity and reasserting liberal values and things like that. So that was quite interesting, and I think it's I gave a good mark for that, although I did note this is very close to not really being an answer to the question. You have to use your own judgment on there. Okay, doesn't migration in contemporary security issues automatically refer to international migration? Because you said we should focus on one type. No, because urbanization was one type that we talked about. And that's migration to cities. So you can talk about specifically the risks of urbanization, and you can talk about, to make it international, you can talk about that urbanization is an international trend. So there's both of that. You should focus on one that you find is extremely important. So, but yeah, the security risk, for example, you could focus on the case of African migrants trying to reach Europe and say this is why it's a security issue. That may be too simple. You might not need 1,500 words for that, but you could expand it, use that as a case to talk about the risks to migrants. So I think it's okay to focus on one type, personally anyway, as long as you're careful to pick something that's important and that's transferable to other cases. And those sorts of risks are posed all over the place. So you could talk about the risks to them, the risks to Mexicans and Central Americans riding on the train called the Beast towards the United States, and how many of them are raped, robbed, murdered on that trip, how dangerous it is, the sorts of policies that increase that danger. I mean, there's so many different ways. I don't want to tell you how exactly to argue something, but I think that you can pick an important situation and argue about that without going off the rails. What are the prospects for human security in the 21st century? That was one of the questions. I mean, what kind of crazy question is that? What does that even mean? What are the prospects for it? Like, yeah, you're free to interpret that, because it's really unclear what that question means. So the prospects could be, what are the odds that governments throughout the world are going to be focusing more heavily on human security? Or you could take it as, how secure are people going to be using human beings as the referent objects? Are there going to be much more dangers? But it could also be, human security is a political phenomenon. What are its prospects? So there are a few ways about that. And you wouldn't be wrong to pick either of those. That's an interpretation of the question. I don't think that would be too bad. I hope that makes sense. So I think, someone told me, and someone gave advice when I was at a conference. I presented at a conference internally for the War Studies department, which was one of the worst experiences of my life the first time, and then I went back for more the next year, and it was much better, so I'm glad I did. But the advice was, if somebody asks you a question that you haven't studied, because it's outside of your topic, you're free to say, I don't know, that's not really my topic, that's not really what I'm studying, that falls outside of the scope of my thesis, this falls outside of the scope of my essay. So it's okay. You don't have to know and talk about everything. But the topic that you choose, you do need to know about it. And you can only say you don't know if it's impossible for people to know, and that's your argument. I'm getting lots of... Oh, okay. This is on Facebook Messenger, which was not one of the ways I said to communicate. Okay. Okay, yeah, some of you having internet issues. Ash is saying he missed the part about using theories to talk about the topics and about liberalism. Yeah, I'll just say again quickly that I'm skeptical of theories. So if you can, because people are they pick one side or the other, and a lot of people are skeptical of theories. So if you ground everything in theory, it's not going to work very well. So that's basically my only point about that, is that, saying, theoretically this is, liberalism says we should, intervene or we should not intervene. Well, who cares what liberalism says? But liberalism will have specific arguments for why you should intervene or not. Just focus on those arguments rather than saying, oh, it's because of liberalism. You're not intervening because of liberalism. You're intervening because you think that there's a genocide going on and genocide's bad and we have a responsibility to protect. That's a liberal argument. You don't have to talk about liberalism, though, to talk about it. You can talk about international law. You can talk about international norms. You can talk about morality. There are plenty of ways to argue that. At the same time, realism would say not to intervene, but you don't have to say we shouldn't intervene because realism says we shouldn't. You should say, this isn't our problem. We're going to get sucked into an insurgency situation or a counterinsurgency situation as we have before. We have nothing to do with this. We have no dog in this fight. It's going to waste blood, money, and treasure. It could make the instability worse if we intervene, and so we shouldn't. So those are the arguments. In a way, those are realist arguments, but it doesn't matter where they come from. They're still legitimate or illegitimate, depending on how you look at it. So I would just take the individual arguments and argue that way instead. Okay, are there any other questions? And are all of you still able? I hope that you've been able to see this fairly well, and I hope that I can somehow post the recordings afterwards. And in any case, I will send you all the notes from my initial little presentation so that you can read them. Actually, send me an email asking for them. I don't want them to go out to everyone, so just the people who were here. Some of you, I don't know who you are. So I've only spoken with a couple of you on the social stream, so I don't know who the rest of you are. So send me an email if you would like a copy of the notes, and I'll reply with an attachment. Okay, any other final questions? Still not getting anybody still there. Oh, wait a minute, because last time when I nearly signed off, people got panicked. Okay, it looks like we're all set with no further questions. If I figure out how to post the two recordings from this, probably the second recording overwrote the first one. That would be sort of normal for how these things work out. If I figure out how to do that, I will also include a link to that if possible, if you email me. There are questions waiting, I've been told. Okay. So is that because the social stream is forcing you to wait or something? Okay. Joy, I will send you a copy of the presentation notes. All right. I don't know why it makes the questions wait before they come out, but I will wait then. Might think about putting them into Twitter or email or something. Might be faster because they're not coming up. Yeah, I'm just gonna go get lunch. I'll come back. Maybe I'll do a tap dance routine, some entertainment while we're waiting. Okay. At least Facebook Messenger works. Oh, okay. So Roberta wanted to know if it's going to be necessary to reference things during the exam, and if yes, what kind. I don't know anything about the exam specifically. That's one problem. But what I will say is, obviously, you can't give perfect footnotes with page numbers and things like that. Nobody expects you to remember that. I think as far as referencing goes in the exam, you should mention the source. So you should say, as Adamson comments in his book of the title. So it would be a good idea to know the names of the authors and the titles of the books or articles that they've written, and to refer to them when you're writing. I think an exam essay, that's the most referencing you would really need to do, because obviously you're not going to know page numbers and things like that. I think that's enough. And by what kind of references, I don't know if that meant as in it's what do you call it, parenthetical citation or footnotes. I wouldn't say either for the exam. It would be reasonable just to mention the author's name in the sentence, and possibly the book or something like that. And then once you've mentioned that, you can just say he also argues, or as Adamson says, or whatever, or Waltz. Also widely known things. Maybe you could even get away with just mentioning the person's last name. So everybody knows Waltz is a structural realist. I prefer that name to neo-realist, because Waltz founded structural realism. He's the high priest of realism because he founded it, founded structural realism anyway. And everybody knows he's nuclear peace. So you can just talk about Waltz's nuclear peace. Everybody knows it's Kenneth Waltz, but if you throw in Kenneth Waltz, that's even better. But again, I don't know specifics about the exam, but I can't imagine it's anything more specific required than that, because that would be pretty unfair. Anything else? Apparently yes. And again, you can email me or Twitter things, to tweet things to me as well. So far I'm just getting requests for... Oh, wait. Here we go. Send me your notes. Okay, no, requests for notes and things like that. Okay, good. Will we be penalized if we use empirical examples without references? Well, I'm not sure what you mean by empirical examples. If you're talking about a case, for example, something that's general knowledge, like the case of African migrants drowning in the Mediterranean, I don't think you need to reference anything when you speak of that, because it's general knowledge. I wouldn't even know where I heard that. I heard it probably The Economist. I get a lot of my news from there, or The Economist Espresso, but you'd hear it on BBC4 or on BBC News, or any newspaper would talk about it. So there's been an increase in migrants in the past few weeks, as a matter of fact, as well, because the weather has been calm. So calm weather in the Mediterranean encourages more people to try to cross, paradoxically. Yeah, that I definitely read in The Economist. So, but I think things that are general knowledge, you don't need to reference. But if it's an idea or a theory or an argument, you should, because that's almost copyright. It's somebody thought of that and made that argument, and you should reference them. But other than that, if you're talking about empirical examples, that sounds like cases in the world. It sounds like current events and things like that. And I think you can easily refer to current events without referencing anybody, if anybody knows about them. Okay. So ideas and theories. Who has that idea? Who has that theory? Who wrote that argument? Whether you'd be penalized, potentially. Especially if it sounds like it's your own. If you can't remember who it is, go for it anyway. Put it in, but definitely make it clear that this isn't something you thought of yourself, because that's technically plagiarism, and you could be penalized for that, definitely. Okay. But yeah, again, current events, general knowledge, especially in this case, you don't have to refer to it. If you're writing an essay where you have time, yeah, if you're going to talk about increased crossings of migrants, for example, to go back to that example, I would put in a citation of where you could go to find that information out, even though it's something that's generally known. It's only generally known for people like us who watch world affairs, right? So it's not generally known for everyone else. But yeah, in the exam, I think that's okay. Any other final questions? Nothing else is coming through on the social stream, which is kind of weird. Please tweet or email me any final questions. I'll hang around for a minute and stare at the screen again and wait a bit. It is actually already 2. I should probably do something today as well. Oh, okay, I finally understand what Tulio wrote 48 minutes ago. An ad now, Jesus Christ. Yeah, unfortunately, it mentioned something about ads. I think I can't avoid them because I didn't pay for a pro account, because I'm probably only going to do this once. So, yeah. Okay. Not getting any more questions, so I think I will sign off soon. Please email or tweet me a question if you still have one. They should come through right away. Still don't seem to have any. Okay, well, if that's all, then I will sign off. Thank you for joining us, and again, I'll try to figure out if I can post that recording somehow, but I honestly don't know if that's possible. Oh, here we go. Something else on the messenger. Oh, how do you think we should revise? Okay, I did give this piece of advice to a couple of people who I spoke to in person. So, okay, now for revising, it's a little bit tricky because I'm one of those people who doesn't study. I've never really studied for an exam before. I think I studied for international law. I remember studying for, I don't know, a few hours or maybe 2 days for once. That was the hardest thing. And I don't know, I've probably studied for math or something before. And learning languages, you have to study vocabulary, rote learning, but otherwise. So I think for studying for the exam, the most important thing is that I would go through and think about what my approach would be to all of these questions. think about how could I answer that question in less than 1,500 words. You don't have enough time to do 1,500 words. I would say at most 1,000. So how am I gonna answer that question? What approach can I take? Is there an essence to that? Do I think this is a yes or a no? Do I have an answer kind of ready for this? What sorts of examples would I need to show? How would I answer it? In general, though, an essay, especially broad essays, are really easy. You get several of them, so you can discard the ones you don't want to do. And then you can argue whichever way you want, and you can avoid the areas that you don't know by just not bringing them up. But you obviously you do need to know the important points, but you should. Most of this is common sense, so most of the stuff I feel like we've talked about in contemporary security issues is fairly commonsensical. Infrastructures. Why are infrastructures risky? Well, because they're complicated. So yeah, I mean, you can just think about that and realize that's the problem with them. How could we secure them? Well, just think about it and then make an argument about it. You probably don't need to remember a lot of specifics about it. About migration. I think the more concept-based stuff like the Cold War or about bipolar structures and things like that you may need a little bit more knowledge about because that's not quite so easy. But I would focus less on learning lots of little minute facts and details and more on do I know the big concepts and can I make an argument out of them and how would I approach that? And I think once you've gotten that sort of straightened out, it should be okay. Okay, getting more messages in here. Okay, so someone is asking any topics we should definitely learn and prioritize. How can we make sure we are prepared for every angle a question is thrown at us? Essay plans for different variations, is that an efficient use of time? Good God, no. You can't prepare for every question that's going to be thrown at you. Be reasonable. So, and I don't think different variations and different angles, yeah, go over them in your head. Think about how you might answer them in different ways. But I wouldn't get obsessive. You should be able to be flexible. The advantage of thinking about it in different ways would be that you learn how to think about things in different ways, not that you then take that and do exactly that on the exam, if that makes sense. So it's about the skill. So practice doing these things so that you have the skill and the flexibility mentally on the exam, rather than practicing them to do that exact thing in that exact way on the exam. How long should each question be in the exam? No fixed number, but on average. Well, I definitely know that they tend to be less than 1,500 words in any case, because it just simply due to the time constraints. How long? I don't even know how long the exam is. I think you have 2 questions in 2 hours. Is that it? So, in any case, however long it is, and however many questions you have to answer, you should think about how much you can write reasonably in that time. And I would strongly, strongly encourage you not to just get the question and start writing. Spend 5 minutes at least thinking about what you're going to do and writing an outline and mapping out how your argument's going to be. You may get stressed out because, I need to start writing. You don't. Actually, a shorter essay can be much better if your argument is really strong and clear. It's only going to be strong and clear if you take time to map out how you're going to do it. You may do that and start writing and find that half an hour later you're done and you're ready for the next one. I've had many times in my life where I've had essay questions and been one of the first to leave and did well. Not always the best, but I did well, which is evidence that it's not the amount of time and the length of the essay necessarily, although writing too short is not good either, but it's how well you argue it. So I think you don't necessarily need loads of time in a really long essay, but plan. Don't look at the questions and then start writing. You have no idea where you're going. And this is another thing I can tell you. Many of you figured out what you were going to write in your conclusion. Like, you got to the conclusion and I said, aha, here, this is getting interesting now. Delete everything else, take that idea from the conclusion and put it at the introduction and start over. And that's simply because you hadn't thought about it until you had gone through everything. But unfortunately, you went through everything by writing it, when you should have gone through everything beforehand and then written what you had down. So do prepare. I see we're at 29 minutes, and I think last time it cut me off at 30 minutes, so we'll see what happens. I will hit broadcast again if it happens, just a heads up. Any other questions left? Oh wait, I think I got some emails in the meantime. Okay. If I write a practice essay on one of the seminar questions, okay. Okay, someone's asking me specifically to view. No, I'm not going to do that. If I tell you I'll read over your sample essay questions. I'll get loads of them. Also, I don't really think it's fair. So I don't think other students are going to have that possibility. Other TAs are definitely not going to do it. So I don't really think it's fair. You're on your own with these, but you guys can do it, And hey, if it's not great this time, you still have 2 more years, right? So this is the first year. It counts for 1/9 of your total grade for the entire bachelor's. So it's almost irrelevant. Be bold and be willing to make mistakes and get better. That's the whole point. So don't worry about it too much. Probably if you're more relaxed, you'll write better anyway. So you can definitely do it though. I hope this has been useful, and I hope you all go on to do well, and I haven't somehow led you horribly astray. I don't know how that would happen. It seems to me this is pretty solid as how to write an essay, but I suppose that everything's possible, right? You can never be 100% secure. Yeah, no, my hope is that notably all of you will be, on average, better than the students from the other seminars. And that's just my conceited hope. My interests are aligned with yours. I hope you do extremely well because it looks good for me too. Any final questions? Which is another reason to be hard on you in those practice essays that you wrote, because that's going to push you to be better in the final one. Unless you totally freak out, so don't freak out. Everything's going to be fine. Okay, I haven't gotten any final questions in a while, and it's already 10 minutes after 2, so I think I really am maybe going to sign off this time. Okay, I've been told there's no more questions on the stream. That's good. All right, then, thank you, everybody. I will see you. I don't know if I'll see you. I'll see some of you online. And I wish you all the best of luck, and good luck on the exam, and good luck in your further bachelor careers and your careers thereafter. All of you are very dedicated and passionate, and it's been really fun to teach all of you. One of my fears teaching was that half the students would somehow be bored or not really thinking about things, and all of you are thinking about things all the time and are very much into it, and that just makes teaching and being involved with you so much more entertaining and so much more fun, because you care, and I care about it too. So I have taught English classes where people didn't want to learn English, and standing up there and teaching when people weren't interested in what you were doing is awful. So thank you very much for your interest, and I wish you all the best. Bye-bye.